Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. We're here today to talk about all the news that's coming out of the Microsoft 365 Community Conference and beyond, because some of the news came before the conference, some of it came after the conference, and of course there was the at-conference experience, the news, everything. It was What
are you doing?
We're recording, and we got a new episode of the Intrazone to get out here. We got to record it first, and then we put it out, right?
Mark, that is not how you start the podcast. Here's how you start the podcast.
Fine, go ahead.
From Synozur, this is Polaris. Today, the world is looking back at the revolutionary news from the Microsoft 365 conference. Led by Jeff Teeper at the keynote, Microsoft rolled forth a broad vision of how AI skills are transforming the world.
This sounds a little dark. I feel like, are you doing like an intro to a futuristic, the world has gone bad? Like maybe we just need to lighten it up a little bit.
Well, that's just how I've been doing things here.
Really? Okay. Well, you're drawing probably a different audience.
I'm just off a flight. I haven't had my coffee. Maybe my voice is a little gravelly. Anyway,
okay.
I think it's about time we explain to the audience what we're doing, but we're going to get started here right now. This is Polaris. Welcome to Polaris Pathways. I'm your host, Chris McNulty, Chief Technology Officer at Synozur. Synozur, the transformation company, reimagines business for our clients, navigating strategies and leadership culture with ease. Today, obviously, I'm being joined by longtime colleague and friend, Mark. Hey, Mark.
Chris, it's nice to meet you, be with you, see you again, of course, see your audience and share a bunch of stuff today and, reminisce just a little bit about the past.
Yeah, we work together at Microsoft, and now we see each other across this great Microsoft community. We thought it would be fun to do a special Intrazone edition of Polaris to talk about the Microsoft 365 conference. So, Mark, it's great to have you back here.
It's great to be here, Intrazone or not Intrazone, co-piloting with you on Synozur and being here in Polaris. That's fantastic.
Having been at the conference and having people ask me, as I'm sure they ask you, about the Intrazone, it's hard to believe there's anyone who doesn't know what it was, might be. Tell me about the Intrazone.
Well, it's certainly a thing of the past, just to be really clear. You can still access all of the old content. In fact, I do still get people coming up saying that they've listened to an episode or two in the past because, it's searchable, it's findable, and it really was still doing the mission that it was originally intended, which was to reach people on a continuous basis throughout the year with information from Microsoft, from Microsoft partners, things that were pretty timely or things that just were relevant in terms of a need to know. And it was a really special offering, I think, for Chris and I to be able to have that conversation in a recurring fashion to talk about news, events, to talk about things that were top of mind in terms of how to and things that you should know about Microsoft 365 technology. So it was a really special project, one that I really enjoyed doing, both as part of my job, but also just as part of the engagement with the community at large. So I know Chris feels the same, but I'd love to get your take on now when people approach you about the Intrazone, outside of it being retrospective, what do you tell people?
Well, apart from everything that you said, which is totally righteous, I also reflect on the fact that I took for granted all of the prep work that you did and all of the production work that Lisa did, because now that that's all on me, I was like, wow, they made me sound like I knew what I was doing. So
you got to show up with your big brain and your nice talkity talk, and you made it easy for me to have a co-host that not only showed up and then carried the water pretty well. Yeah. I still am handing out Intrazone belts because we have a few from the swag backlog, and I always ask if there are any fans of the Intrazone who would like a belt, and so far I've always gotten a taker. So still very fun, and still people approaching me. I don't know if anybody's ever approached you this way. It always makes me chuckle. Might sound a little silly to say here, but people will still come up and say, it's really great to put a face to the voice, but then when they start talking with me, they're like, but it's still weird because I know your voice from listening to the Intrazone and just, seeing you talk, it's a little weird because I only know you as the voice. So it's kind of fun to see them go through the kind of getting adjusted to, hey, there's a face to the voice. But yeah, good memories.
Folks have asked me about Polaris why do we do this audio only? And my answer is, first, well, that's the way we did it on the Intrazone.
That's right.
And it's not that we don't. In fact, we're pulling a lot of video snippets from today. So if you're watching us, it's the 3D version of the Intrazone. So we're going to get into the Microsoft 365 Community Conference here in a minute. But first, let's look at the news and our data points. And as usual, our references will be included in the show notes. One recent story was talking about the rise of AI and enterprise content management platforms. So modern ECM software is now supporting auto-classification using structural, textual features, AI-generated document summaries, contextual Q&A, ongoing learning modules, and more. So this significantly can reduce manual workloads while strengthening compliance readiness. At the same time, though, it does put a lot of pressure on those content systems, whether they're Microsoft or not, for information to be properly structured and properly classified. I literally came back from the AIIM conference in Baltimore about 6 hours ago. And that readiness, especially content readiness, was a big topic for organizations who have nothing to do with Microsoft. So it's pretty common. Mark, love to get your take on what that means.
I think there's the huge benefit that is just what we'll always pay forward is that you're generating kind of the underpinning metadata and the structure of lifecycle management and all the things that the AI elements will contribute to, if not take over in some respects. But it also just breaks away from, you have a great system in place and nobody's really populating it with the right information. So if it can accelerate the collection of better structured metadata and just metadata in general be more available, that means that you'll be able to ground it not just in the content, but in the meaningfulness of the content. So I think the big win is if the form that nobody ever filled out gets filled out and is valid and truthful, that's the other little sticking point, then you will have a system that works better, hopefully better over time, because there's just more information. Not only what do you have access to, what's the content, but what is the underlying description of the content that helps it land in the right way to the right people. So I think it'll accelerate that. If the promise is true, it'll just harden what we think of as just good content management, good information about the information.
News item 2. According to industry research, AI workplace adoption has hit a staggering 91% this year, with 5.4 average time savings per employee. This is a study that looked at 443 million work hours across over 1,000 companies. Over 75% of companies plan to adopt AI by next year, which seems a little hard if we're already at 91%, but the numbers are big. Certainly out there. But Mark, I'd love to get your take. Like, do you think there's sometimes a bit overstated, or does that sort of match what you've seen in your experience?
Because I have a little gray hair, I still sometimes just lean on the fact that technology at scale, especially in the enterprise, still takes a while. There might be people dabbling in it or, executives or broad leadership that it's interested in AI helping us do X and Y. And they're really starting to define what it is that they want from it, how their team is going to use it, obviously how to fund it, adjusting budgets and all of that. So the nature of things just take time, both the companies, their natural curve of adoption. This one probably has a little steeper adoption curve than most just because the want is there. We want it to help solve all of these things. But then there's the reality of the things that just take time to put in place. The cleansing of the house so that the AI elements that you get back from it are mostly honest and truthful. That just will always get better, of course. But then it's not finding the cruft. So you got to kind of clean house and organize. And even just looking at that, getting your content in better order, forget AI for a second. That just is going to take time.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. Again, having been at the AIIM Summit, sponsored by AIM, I was in one session on Wednesday where it was about 50 people in the room. The speaker asked, show of hands, how many people have AI as part of their everyday routine? And I was the only hand up.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that AIM does, which I like, is they organize the conference into cohorts. So there's a team of, they break up, you're in about one of 50 teams. And I was a team lead. And the idea is you gather for meals and, you talk about the keynote for 30 minutes after the keynote and all these checkpoints. And so we were doing the reflection on the conference, and people were sharing what they thought was their most impactful moment. And I was talking about the fact that there's definitely a lot of AI at this event too. And I went to a presentation from a woman from Amazon who was talking about shifting context windows for token requirements and how context window is for the entirety of the conversation. So if you're doing something that's in code, that's a single shot prompt, you can reduce the content window to reduce your token budget. And I'm explaining that to the people at my table who are looking at me like I'm speaking Sanskrit.
Yeah. So you would say you're an advocate for not saying thank you at the end as a new prompt right back as you're closing out. You don't say thanks because
Oh,
that's a
no. I had a discussion with her. I'll put a link to her session in the show notes because it was a fabulous session. She was talking about the token cost of could you please and thank you and all the rest of that. And that is true from an energy and a compute level. But I've also read some analysts, and I tend to agree with them about the human cost, that if we adopt the habit, and as AI systems increasingly are becoming vocal driven, right? That you speak to your AI instead of typing to it. And if you get into the convention of you don't need to say, could you please and thank you, isn't that going to start to tilt the way you speak to everybody else in the world? Like
right.
if I'm
Yeah.
going to bark orders at Copilot, it's a bad habit for when I'm talking to one of my developers.
I can see that going into the way that you started this with the dark intro. It might get a little darker if we go that way.
Oh, well, anyway,
Well,
enough on news. Mark, are you ready to take a look at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference?
I am ready. Let's fly back to Orlando and revisit all the good things that came out of it.
Let's go. I'll insert space for that. Okay, so welcome back. And we've been talking with Mark Kashman on a special Intrazone edition of Polaris. I feel a little funny welcoming you to the Intrazone edition of Polaris, but Mark, welcome.
Welcome to the Intra Polaris with Mark and Chris.
Yeah. Where are you calling from today?
I am calling from Seattle, Washington, technically West Seattle. It is an unusual but very pleasant sunny day here where I don't know if you can see, but we're doing short sleeves. It might crack into the high 60s, maybe 70 degrees.
Yeah. Full disclosure for those of you watching this, I'm also in the Seattle area. It has gotten so oddly warm and a little muggy that we had our air conditioning on overnight.
Oh,
So I'm dressed like it's a Seattle winter right now, but that's going to change as soon as I get outside.
well, you come back from Orlando and it's been, a little bit sunnier and a little bit warmer. And then, expect to come back to the PNW and have, a beanie cap or a light jacket or something like that.
So, Mark, for the folks in our audience who are meeting you for the first time, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your journey through Microsoft and to where you are now.
Yeah. So pre-Microsoft, I was working for Microsoft in their kind of video editing department for the local sales team. And so I got kind of my first toe in the water of listening to a lot of people who were subject matter experts that were then getting their information out to the Microsoft field. And that job rolled into working at Microsoft about 20 years ago. And I went through a lot of things working in the sales organization. Then I moved to the consulting services and we built a solution on top of SharePoint. That's where SharePoint came into my world. And then it was just a litany of products that were based on SharePoint. SharePoint itself, from the marketing side, also got into the engineering side, but not as an engineer. And then got to be the product manager for Microsoft Lists, Office 365 Video, which became Stream, which is now Clipchamp. And I got to take the reins of Delve just for a little bit as it was switching hands between a couple of other product managers. And I also got to be the lead marketer for OneDrive at a point in time that was about 3 months, but I've always loved OneDrive and they're so closely connected. Anyway, outside of that, as a marketer, we got to do a lot of great things, event outreach, of course, the Intrazone that now everybody is either surprised by or familiar with on this particular podcast. But that outreach of information never stopped with customers, partners, of course, internal when we had the outbound and the inbound, and just working across whatever it is that SharePoint needed, whether it was social, whether it was, meeting with analysts, or some of the fun of being at an event. And if it was a small enough event, maybe doing a keynote here and there, doing breakout sessions at the bigger events, or sometimes just being behind the scenes,
Right.
making sure everybody has what they need, and always being a good advocate for both the community and, of course, the product team, and trying to meld those things together over time.
Right. As we both know, there is life outside Microsoft.
There is.
Mark is, you may not realize this, but Mark is a recognized children's book author, creating works like Catterslug and many others.
Yep.
There's also life after Microsoft. So, as we both know, what have you been doing since you left Microsoft?
Yeah, so what was a lot of storytelling and evangelizing and, getting the word out, kind of the is something new, and then you kinda get to do a lot of the what's new sessions. My life is now translated into more doing the work and working with customers. I work at Simpraxis Consulting, and we're a pretty small consulting firm that does the work. We obviously come up with solutions, work with the customer. What are you trying to accomplish? What is your budget? What do you need? And then once we get to the art of the possible, or getting beyond the what's new and what are we going to do, then it's actually turning to doing it and working with customers to build out intranets and maybe hone up what they're doing with Microsoft Teams. A lot of work with lists and things that I've done in the past that I used to mostly build out demos are now actually in production, which is the new thing for me. But still, the stronghold of the other side of Simpraxis is being very community oriented. Again, we're a small team, but we do a lot of impact with events that we're both submitting sessions to, and if we get accepted, obviously speaking at. We also run an event of our own, which is part of the community. It's called Collab Days New England, and that's something that we take on soup to nuts. Getting sponsors, accepting sessions, speaking ourselves, and then running it. Where we get to carry around the food for the day of bringing in lunch for the event.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a left to right of what I've done. Some of the stuff that's new, I still tell stories. That's a great way to present, is talk about how you use the technology. Or now I get to reflect and say, actually, working with a customer who's trying to do a very similar thing like I'm showing you, to hone up their communications or to maybe make collaboration a little bit easier and programmatic as they do it, at the thousands of pace. So, there's a lot about moving beyond Microsoft. It's been a wonderful journey. It's been obviously a big part of now what I carry forward. Having the 20-year history gives me a little bit of a foothold into what I'm doing now. I mostly know what I'm doing, and I'm learning a lot in terms of whatever's new. So I assume you could
Yeah,
say some of the same, in terms of how you got here. I think your audience here on Polaris probably knows, but it's been nice being on this journey and unexpectedly in a similar pattern.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So let's look at the conference itself, because you
Yeah.
and I were chatting while we were there last week, and just earlier this week as we were preparing for this. One thing I think we both came to is looking at the news out of the conference is what's happening with skills, especially skills through SharePoint itself. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So, to put the joke in there that everybody hopefully is already thinking about, these are a very particular set of skills. But they really are, I think, the next level of how do you make AI more usable for what you're trying to do with it. The content is important, the context is important. And as much as I understand, I'll be transparent. I'm not the deepest expert on skills just yet, but what they do is that puts it into context of how you want to do business. Maybe there's a flow to how you do things and some specific specificity that your team, at the very team level, because it's very site oriented, there are these markdown files or .md files that sometimes get auto created for you because you're starting to have that conversation at the site level with Copilot in this instance, or AI in SharePoint now is kind of pervasive, and or you want to build them out programmatically on, or,
Yep.
or very specifically on your own, to describe here's the tone of our discussions and our messaging, here's the themes, that how we want our content to both look like and feel,
Mhm.
and then here's how we ground it in some terminology or people or events or products or whatever, to be really clear. Don't just go hunting for it and finding what you might have discovered as this pervasive AI throughout the intranet, but really to be specific on saying, here's the product name, here's the product description, here's how we talk about it, here who owns it, here's what we can and can't do with it. All of those things you can kind of ground more so than just the information that it'll glean from PowerPoints and Word.
I mean,
But
the promise of skills to me is you can take, it's an extension of what was originally in Copilot as instructions, where you have
Hmm.
these standing rules for how you do things. You can encapsulate those in saying, here's how I build a regular Word document, or here's how I build a customer proposal. I want you to use this font, this template. I want you to use this writing level, get your images from here. And you can bake all of those things into these skills files. You don't have to actually write the file. You can,
Hmm. Hmm.
with Markdown becoming one of these most common file formats. Notepad now doesn't just edit text, but it can do some of the light formatting that you have in Markdown. So even if you don't want to use the, you know, two hash marks to signal that something's bold, you can go into Notepad and edit your Markdown pretty easily.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. I kind of like to see in the way that Notepad is growing up. It's funny to see the broader community, especially people like Paul Thurrott, who's big on Notepad. He always says, I just want Notepad to be dumb. I want it to just be simple. No more features for Notepad. But alas, Markdown inches it
Right.
up just a little bit more.
It- what I took from the conference is there's two things within Microsoft that are coming together.
Hmm.
One is Copilot CoWork. So Copilot CoWork shares a lot of common DNA with skills in SharePoint, in that it is how you interactively build out a skill. Some of the same things I just mentioned, like I want to create this kind of estimation template in Excel. Uh, And it stores those as Markdown files that live inside of your OneDrive in the
Hmm.
Microsoft incarnation. It's based on Anthropic technology. So across our organization, we're coming to really love the CoWork environment. The catch is each one of those skills is particular to you. And the guidance on how do you get Copilot CoWork? You built a great skill, and you can build a skill through a prompt saying, I want you to build a
Hmm.
skill to do this. How do I get that skill once I've perfected it into other people's hands? And so you've got this great capability that's very individualized coming in from one direction.
Yep.
And you have the SharePoint perspective coming from, by the way, Zach Rosenfield, who knew? Like,
Yeah, I know. I think he's gunning. I think he's gunning to be an MVP because his demos are not only really good, but they're like in numbers and growing. He's got a great YouTube channel.
yeah, I do. I mean, by the way, folks, Zach is a good friend of ours. For years, he worked at overseeing a lot of the back end capacity systems for OneDrive
Hmm.
and SharePoint, and looking at things like backup and recycle bin and recovery and being out front. And he's great at it. But I do think he may have looked at the wrong letter. Like if he's gunning for CVP, I think he playbook for MVP.
MVP. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever he's doing, it's well received because you
Right.
hear a lot about it, out and about. Like, have you seen
Yeah.
Zach's new YouTube playlist? It's awesome. And I do want to give another shout out. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if you have, Chris,
Yeah.
but there's a really great 60-minute episode that Vlad Castranescu has put out.
Yeah.
That's really great. A 101 about skills that's a very good left to right and very demo oriented like Zach, where you can see what does a skill file look like? How transportable is it? Which is in the SharePoint side of things, very transportable. Even if it, has to be tweaked from site to site. The portability of it is really nice. But
Yeah. And that,
uh,
so a couple things. Yes, Vlad stuff is great, and I highly recommend folks. We'll put a link in the notes to let you get there. So you have these individualized skills coming from CoWork,
mhm,
but in the Copilot interface, which is where people hang out. And you have these group skills that SharePoint is orchestrating that are driven through the SharePoint web interface, which is, yes, it's widely used, but it's not as pervasive and up in people's face as that. So
yep,
the belief and the hope, and I talked to Zach about this, I talked to a bunch of folks in the engineering team about this, is that those two streams need to converge.
yeah, I agree. I feel like one thing that would just be if I, put my MVP hat on with things that aren't NDA,
Yeah.
the nature of when I move from conversation to conversation that may be in an Office app to SharePoint to Outlook, wherever that is, I do want it to know who I am in all of those conversations with some connective tissue that basically is kind of the improved memory of Copilot. Doesn't always have to carry over every action, but I really do feel like I'm still kind of talking in silos, even if the tech is kind of similar.
Yep.
But that's just a feel. It's a reality, but it also is something that if it got better over time, I think would be a big win.
So let's chat about something else that was sort of embedded in the conference. You had a great take on this, that the news that, hey, Viva Connections is now going to be called this radical new thing called SharePoint.
SharePoint.
And, naming and branding is one of these things that, people outside Microsoft scratch their head about. While I was inside Microsoft, I scratched my head sometimes, and I also contributed to it.
Mhm.
Um, but you were talking a lot about what you think that means for the everyday user in terms of brand experience and how you should think about, those sorts of announcements or the things that the OneDrive team is announcing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, specifically just to kind of ground in, Viva Connections is now moving to be called SharePoint, and technically SharePoint app in Teams, because it's a distinct feature where you bring your core company portal into Teams. So the notion has been out there. The reality of how it's accomplished has changed a little. Like, it's now more SharePoint than it was before, but now it's really just SharePoint home sites, 100%, which is a good thing. And brand aside, did it need a brand initially? Maybe. Does it need one now? Absolutely not. The brand, of course, SharePoint isn't going away, never has, never will. And if anything, if people refer to it as the name of their company portal as an app in Teams, that's a win too. Um, but the reality of where the things are built and what they're leveraging is the common platform, and hopefully then becomes this common experience. There's some technology that the OneDrive team is in charge of for sharing. For some of the Markdown viewing is technically released as a OneDrive feature, but it's pervasive in OneDrive and SharePoint, and I'll even add in Teams as well. And I think that motion of where are you working and what are you trying to accomplish? Does it always need another brand name to tell you what it is? I think a lot of people would argue no. Does it need a big brand name from a Microsoft perspective to get the announcement out on day one and kind of point at this new capability? Maybe, because that's the way that engine works. But
right.
to know behind the scenes of what I think Chris is really steeped in, and of course I was as well, is these are the same people working together, whether they're on the OneDrive team or the SharePoint team. Their tech is going to go beyond the walls of that particular product because that's how the platform is built. And I think that's a good thing. And I think the fewer brands usually pays off better. I like the move of what DC Purdue and team are doing, both with the move to move away from the branding for specifically Viva Connections and just landing it into, yes, it's SharePoint. And by the way, it's more SharePoint than it's ever been because you can do all the SharePoint things with web parts and sections and page layouts, and the mobile responsiveness is there, and you manage it more in the SharePoint Admin Center and on and on. That's all a good thing.
Right. It's all flowing together and becoming much more coupled. I do think that means people need to think about the outcomes they're looking for, less about the tool. Like, it's not that you go to OneDrive, it's that OneDrive comes to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Something else that you were chatting about, and you got to more of the sessions on this than I was able to.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking a lot about Agent 365 and some of the rest of the things that you were absorbing about Studio and CoWork, and like, how do you see the agent side of this all flowing together?
Yeah, I'll be transparent here. When it goes beyond Agent 365 is where I start to get a little fuzzy. But the value of Agent 365 is probably what it sounds like: managing agents at scale. Agents, in one way, I've been understanding, is they're kind of being a little bit more like people in terms of not just licensing, but kind of entities that you can assign things to. And it's kind of like at mentioning Mark and Chris, you can at mention an agent, which means it's kind of in the directory. It's an entity, and it has things that it can do, and maybe more over time, things that it's doing on your behalf. CoWork has a really great benefit of, having a conversation and then off it goes and does a lot of things. So the traceability of what that agent then goes and does on your behalf obviously always starts with you, has an element of now being able to be managed and managed at scale. And then when you talk about the plethora of the types of agents that people can create or they may then consume and use, those are SharePoint agents, agents you build in Copilot Studio, visual code style agents, agents in Foundry. But basically, agents, giving you a single pane of glass to be able to better manage them, just like you would manage people and sites. So this tool is a pretty significant one to be able to manage agents at scale wherever they were created because they're active within your tenant.
Yeah, I have a bit of skepticism about how Agent 365 is going to deal with its aspiration of managing all the agents that you run,
Yep.
regardless of whether they're composed on Microsoft or if someone is running something from Agentforce. Is Agent 365 going to be able to govern it?
Yeah.
It may, but even if it doesn't, there's just so many things that are coming from Microsoft, from all of the maker tools, Agent Builder, and then all of the gentification of things that are coming from Copilot Studio and everything else. Just being able to orchestrate that alone, it solves 60% of your needs. Folks, if you didn't get to go to the conference, there's one thing you'll be glad you missed, is that it's big enough that it's really spread across 2 conference centers divided by a really long hallway, walking outside, and a
I was going to say,
giant escalator.
always take the outside route. It was very nice.
Yeah. So I had to run back from one side to the other to meet up with Roberto Iglesias, who was delivering the session on Purview.
Hmm.
As much as Agent 365 is about governing how agents interact with AI, Purview really looks at how the non-agent use of AI, otherwise known as human beings, work. And there were some capabilities, I think, that are important to look at, especially not just shaping where can AI go, what are the controls around the content, but being able to look at the human interaction of it. Like, what are the areas of interest that we just don't want people to go to? We have semantic engines that can say, even if the content is unprotected, and it should be protected, that if someone says, please tell me the top 10 salaries of people in the organization, you can put rules in saying, questions about salary are not things that we're going to capture. So, Purview is moving to a much more sophisticated environment. They're bringing together their DSPM classic, the data security posture management, DSPM for AI, into a unified engine that looks much more holistically across all the interactions people have with content and with AI itself. And so that's one that we're already making use of with some of our clients. And I encourage folks to take a look at. I don't know if you
Yeah.
had to see any of that, but
I didn't, and I just only kind of get what I know about Purview from our friend Joanne Klein and some of the output that she does. The thing that I kind of understood is it's starting to consolidate, like you rambled, a few of the kind of the subcomponents. Because if you go looking for Purview where you don't know where to go look, it kind of is buried in a lot of the Azure services world, and
yeah.
in ways that it's kind of a little hard to find. And that may be just me, but I think because it's such a pervasive technology that's kind of probably already consolidated more than I know, but it seems to be consolidating in this case under a good brand for what it means, but pulling together a lot of capabilities. And on top of that, then you really get to a next level of maturity when you start to want to manage your content and data structure flow in terms of how people are looking for things and finding things and then what they do try to do with it, managing that at scale through policies and all the things
Right.
that Purview does from a security perspective is really good. But I think it's also kind of it's really coming together more so than I've seen it. And I have a lot to learn about it from a product perspective, but seeing how people react to it and kind of the where it fits into the full package seems to be gleaning and getting better over time.
I'm fascinated to hear you say that, whether you realize it as you describe Purview as security. Because historically, Purview's always been compliance, right? We're going to focus
Sure.
on things like e-discovery and retention and records management and data loss prevention. And it's morphing into looking at interaction models. Security is hard,
Hmm.
fat, like authentication, authorization, and all of that. Whereas Purview is starting to take on a lot of those blended security roles about saying, in context, this action makes sense. In context, this action doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, in context, can I write a question in a Word document for HR about, should we know who the top 10 earners are in this firm?
Hmm.
Absolutely. You can write that question there.
Yep.
You can't write it into a query that's going to go to AI. And
Right.
Copilot. Purview is an interesting space to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey,
I think I've also heard it described as information protection. I think that's what my brain was then securing that from how people access or don't access different ways of ways that information is out there.
So, Mark, let's wrap it up. The conference is coming in a fascinating year because SharePoint is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and an awful lot of software never makes it to 5. So,
True.
you were talking a bit about just what that means for the community, not just in terms of cake, but in terms of cinema.
Yeah.
Talk about your role in More Than Code.
Yeah, so I think this is one of those choices that Microsoft made that was really good because it's paid off over now a couple of weeks where there was a big event, SharePoint at 25, where they kind of announced a few new things that we talked about. Then it rolled into very nice community gathering at the community conference that culminated in a premiere of a new SharePoint short film called More Than Code, which is now out and available on the adoption.microsoft.com site. Very easy to find if you type in aka.ms/SPAT25/more than code. Did you get that? Um, but it's a fun, very oriented around the community, voices from the community that focuses on learning the history of the product, obviously the growth and the value of the community. People from Microsoft, myself included, obviously from Microsoft and beyond. But there's really nice set of voices that are sharing some of their insights, both about the product and about the community. And it's a nice tribute that pays it back to the community in a lot of nice ways. But holistically, I think they've done a nice job celebrating the culmination of 25 years of this product that, a lot of people ask repeatedly, has SharePoint died? Is SharePoint dead? And, really 25 years later, it's in my mind, I'm very biased in lots of great ways, but it really is stronger and more connected than ever. And there's so much more that this team is building on to do refinements, to harden the core, and of course, build new technology.
Yeah.
I think the last thought before I get your take, Chris, is it's not the oldest technology at Microsoft. There's products that have also recently celebrated their 30th and their 40th birthday.
Right.
So, kudos to those other tech. But, at its teenage beyond years, SharePoint's looking pretty good.
I said this to Adam Harmetz when he was on Polaris a few months back. If you go back to SharePoint 2001, which I do, you had a browser where someone can upload a document for collaboration. They can do search. And that's an enduring pattern with all of the other things that have come up. Who knew what AI was going to mean 25 years later?
Yeah.
First, that's a pattern, I think, that somewhere in the world, when SharePoint is 50, there's still someone who's going to open up a web browser and upload a document to it. And I think it's that because that's the right pattern. It's in some ways, it's why rock and roll endures. It just works. It brings so many people together. And what I love about this technology is the community. It is an opportunity for me to be able to get to meet and get to revisit so many people who I wouldn't have ever met otherwise from all over the world. Whether we're gathering in Orlando or in Burlington for collab days, SharePoint Saturday, whatever we want to call it. And then there's a role for everyone in that community.
Yeah, 100%.
So, Mark, I always like to ask guests on this about a recent film that's had an impact on you. Something else. Is there something like that you'd care to share?
Well, it is probably one that's going to not only resonate with a lot of people, but it's not like a hidden treasure or a secret. It is a wonderful both book and the movie. It was Project Hail Mary. I am of the camp that loved the book and really loved the movie, both in that they were unique, but also the same, and they did justice at left and right. Book was great. Movie was great. I would highly recommend both. And to do one before the other obviously might be the right thing to do, but even just seeing the movie, it's a fantastic movie, even if you haven't read the book.
So, folks, Mark Kashman is the senior M365 consultant at Simpraxis. You can catch him on his Cashbox newsletter on Substack, his LinkedIn, and of course, anywhere SharePoint is being discussed with 3 or more people around the world.
That's right. Click your heels 3 times and say SharePoint, 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 and I'll be there.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, can you stick with us for the wrap-up?
Yeah. Aren't you wrapping up in like 10 seconds? I'm not going anywhere.
We'll be right back. Up next on Polaris, events. 2026 is a busy year for events. Here's what we're watching.
First up, we've got the European Collaboration Summit, obviously known as ECS. That's May 5th through the 7th. That's in Cologne, Germany. I'm literally days away from hopping on a plane. So if you're going to be at ECS, can't wait to see you there. There's going to be 3 keynotes, hundreds of speakers. I think they usually get about 2,500 to 3,000 people. So it's a great mingling, just like what happened in Orlando. Rinse and repeat on the EU across the pond.
It's a huge event, and another one coming up just after that, TechCon 365 Chicago. This will kick off June 15th at McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois. I'll be there. Synozur will be there. Synpraxis will be there. Microsoft will be there. And I think that continues on later on in the summer, Mark.
Yeah, we've got TechCon keeping on rolling. TechCon Seattle, which is August 24th through the 28th, I think. And it is downtown Seattle. There's tons of great things to do in Seattle. Very similar to other TechCon events. There'll be a keynote, and then there'll be just a pervasive nature of expo hall and sessions. And we hope to have great weather for you all. There's a coffee place nearby anywhere you go. So grab a pier, go get some coffee, wander around Pike Place Market. We hope to see you in Seattle.
Another great vacation destination, folks, is autumn in New England. So looking forward to Collab Days New England, October 16th. This is a chance for you to experience the best of M365 content curated and delivered by Mark and his friends at Synpraxis, surrounded by peak foliage season and fingers crossed. And here comes the gratuitous sports reference that I only do when
I've been waiting for it.
Hopefully the Red Sox will be in contention in mid-October. Odds are pretty good this year. They're not. They just fired Alex Cora as their manager, but that's it for events, and I'll shut up about sports.
I just can't wait for the Mariners to clobber the Red Sox, and then you and I head to head.
So we'll have details on all that and more in the blog. You can learn more at Synozur.com/events, and we'll add more events throughout the year. And if you have an upcoming event you'd like us to promote, please get in touch, and we'd be happy to include it. Next time on Polaris, I'll be sitting down with Bill Barkovic from Microsoft and Michelle Boyd from Synozur to talk about Native American tribes. In North America, Native American tech leaders navigate a complex mix of businesses, energy, health, gaming, education, public safety, and more. Increasingly, AI is central to that mission. We were all just at the Microsoft Tribal CIO Summit last month at the Redmond campus. Don't miss our recap. Well, that's a wrap for another episode. I'd like to thank Mark Kashman for joining us.
We encourage you to check out Chris's show page for links to everything that we talked about today and more. Just visit polaris.synozur.com.
And send us your questions and feedback for the Synozur team. You can reach us via email at polaris@synozur.com.
Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show, and follow Chris wherever you get your favorite podcast.
Polaris is produced with help from Riverside FM. Our theme song, Alternative Dream, is provided courtesy of Adobe. Additional music and sound provided by Indie Guy Records. Graphic design by Josh Brantley. Mark, this has been great. We'll have to do this again.
I absolutely would say yes anytime, Chris.
Well, thanks for listening. I'm Chris McNulty.
I'm Mark Kashman.
And this has been Polaris, a show that charts the course for business and technology transformation from Synozur. Learn more at Synozur.com. See you next time. Keep following your North Star.